everyone, Ogre27 Kane here today, and I think we're going to do a mashup of 4 episodes of 10 great Nintendo Switch titles, episodes 1 through 4. Now, I chose to just do a quick mashup on this because I'm still working on my top 10 games of 2023, and that list has turned into quite a bit of work. So I hope this tides you over in the meantime, and I should have that list out here within the next couple of weeks. So thank you, and have a great day and enjoy this video. Hello everyone, Ogre27 Kane here today, and I think it's time for something completely different. Today I want to do just 10 great Nintendo Switch titles. It's going to be a new series. I just want to feature 10 great games at a time. These 10 games aren't necessarily going to be in any sort of order or any sort of pattern. They aren't necessarily my favorites or in any order of being a favorite. They're just 10 great Switch games that I think everybody should try out before it's too hard. So let's check out some of these great games and see what's going on. As considering I have 150 plus games, this series should go on for a little bit, and hopefully you find a couple of hidden gems in here, stuff that you'd like to try out or new games that you've never seen before. So let's start out now with number 10, good old Skyrim, The Elder Scrolls V. So for this entry I decided to bring in an expert in this game, my daughter, Dovahkiin16. Dovahkiin, what do you think about this game?
What I like about this game, it's very free roam. You kind of get to do what you want instead of just having to immediately just forces you to do something. Once you finish like the main beginning quest, it just lets you go off and do whatever you want. The last thing I want to add is that my favorite quest line was the Dragonborn DLC on Solstheim. Made the game a lot more longer, a lot more funner, and just gives you like a glimpse of like another Dragonborn.
Well, thank you so much, Dovahkiin16. I really appreciate your insight. You have put a lot more time into this than I have. I thought I was a pro at this game, but you certainly have me beat. This game has so many different quest lines, so much stuff to do, and so many fun things to find. I love the combat, I enjoy the upgrade system, the world map is super interactive and fun. It's topographical in a sense that the older games weren't necessarily. On top of that, you also have a lot better graphics and animations, and of course, it's all to go on the Nintendo Switch. There's not really a better choice for an Elder Scrolls game, and the Nintendo Switch is a great space to find a game like this. I really enjoyed it. So, I think we should move on to our next one now. Number 9, Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered. Now, this is an awesome collection because it not only contains Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered, but you also get the free download of Assassin's Creed Liberation, a PlayStation Vita game actually. Now, first up, we have Assassin's Creed 3, and they did a pretty good job. I know a lot of people have complained about some of the performance issues on it, but they never once really bothered me. The game honestly performs much better than it did originally on the Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3. This remastered port on the Switch is definitely an upgrade, and the game can handle a lot more going on at one time than those versions could. It's definitely a lot better in terms of the control style as well. The controls on this game feel a lot more comfortable, and they feel more akin to Assassin's Creed 4 or some of the later titles. So there's definitely a lot going on here, and it's not something you should sleep on. I really enjoyed this version of Assassin's Creed 3, and it's one of my favorite games. Let's talk a little bit about Liberation now. Well, this game was originally a PlayStation Vita game, and a really good one at that. The main campaign's a little shorter, only takes you about 20, maybe 30 hours at most to beat, but there's plenty to do, and the world's pretty big for a tiny little Vita game. This is one of the few Vita games that kept me playing for a lot longer than I expected, and one of the main reasons I enjoy that console so darn much. The nice part about all this, though, is that you get Assassin's Creed 3 on the cartridge, and Liberation is given to you as a download, so you get to choose how you want to do it. Let's do number 8 now, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. But this is also known as the Rebel Collection, and it contains Assassin's Creed Rogue on top of that. Now you get Assassin's Creed 4 on the cartridge, and you get Assassin's Creed Rogue as the download. Rogue is considerably bigger than Liberation though, so you definitely need a lot more space to play this game. Now, Assassin's Creed 4 is one of the funnest and best games in the series, and it features a pirate, rather, if you would, going throughout the Caribbean. He is a relative of Connor from Assassin's Creed 3, and it gives you essentially some backstory on what's going on in some of the later episodes of 3. I really enjoy this game because it's not the same kind of game. It is definitely one that is just more about the exploration and having fun in the world itself. The game has a massive world, as you can see right here, and there's so much to explore. Yes, the storyline is intriguing and it has its own little merits to it, but it's not the best part. So this game's unique out of the old ones. Let's talk about Rogue now. Now, I'll be completely honest, I haven't really played much of Rogue. Rogue seems like a pretty fun game, but it's definitely taken a lot of what made Assassin's Creed 4 fun, and it tried to build on that a little bit. It has a little bit deeper narrative that kind of twists down a different path, but that doesn't take anything away from the free roam and the parkour and the exploration of the game. So I definitely think it's worth a try, and considering you get it for free with one of the best Assassin's Creeds of all time makes it worth it. Let's do number 7 now, Eastward. Well, I don't really know what to say about this game. This is one of the strangest RPGs I've ever played. It has a really good story, but it's a really twisted story, and it takes a lot to understand. I do enjoy the combat in this game, and it has a pretty fun little upgrade system on top of that. As you can see here, all the cutscenes are hand-drawn and have an amazing animation and art style, which makes the game a lot more lively and fun. But it takes a lot to put your mind through the story and wrap around all the concepts they're trying to introduce. The story has a bit of a Groundhog's Day kind of aesthetic to it, where you repeat a lot of events, and little things change as you do, but they all kind of add up to make a pretty good, fun, and unique story. On top of that, the characters are all fun and lively too, and you enjoy them. The main character that you play as, John, doesn't really say much throughout the whole story, but he plays his part well, almost like the Link of the game. All of the robots that you see in this game too have their own little unique aesthetic too, and they don't necessarily follow the given laws of most robotic creatures in most worlds. So it will throw you off. It's not what you expect from this kind of game. Eventually though, I would like to completely finish this game 100% and come back and give it a full review on the channel, because I do feel this game's a hidden gem. So let's do number 6 now. Well, this is the Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection from Konami, and I've got my special guest here doing this one with me, and this is Froggo14. Say hi, Froggo14, and give some thoughts on this game.
Hello. I think this game is really fun. We've played almost every game in this game. I like the beat 'em ups, and I enjoy playing them with my dad. I really love all of them, and I just can't pick a favorite one. You should really go check out the review we did of this originally a while back.
Well, thank you for all your insight there, Froggo. I really appreciate playing these games and having a lot of fun with you. You're definitely one that makes this a lot more interesting. I played a lot of these games growing up myself, and I enjoyed a lot of them with my siblings, but being able to enjoy them with my kids makes it all the more fun. And on top of that, they're great games, so you should definitely invest in this and go check these games out. I'm glad Konami brought them back to us and made a great job doing these, up-resing these, and giving us good ports. They include a lot of cool stuff. Now, as I previously stated, there are 13 plus games on this, included with tons of different things like artwork and sounds and music, and on top of that you got a 4-player simultaneous on some games, and there's a lot of different tournament fighters and different arcade games, NES games, and as you're seeing here, both Hyperstone Heist from the Sega Genesis and the Ninja Turtles in Time from the Super Nintendo. So me and my daughter like to go back and forth on those two games and figure them out. Well, now I'm going to do number 5, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. And once again, I have Froggo14 with me sharing a few thoughts. Froggo, tell us a quick thing about this game.
This is much higher quality than the other ones. And I'm not saying I'm picking favorites, but I am picking favorites. We will do a review of this very soon, though.
It's definitely your favorite one, huh?
Yes.
I would say so. Mine too. Now with this one being a newer game, it has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. And on top of having the great beat 'em up combat and the great multiplayer aspects and everything else to it, this game has a lot of new moves, and a lot of new cutscenes, a great world map that illustrates itself much like the old cartoon used to. If you enjoyed Saturday morning cartoons and played a lot of Ninja Turtles back in the day, this game will bring you back. It is such a great nostalgia fest, and then on top of that, it's a fantastic game. And I guess it's getting some extra DLC, I'm not totally sure about that. One other thing that I have to appreciate about this is that the physical version comes with a full color instruction manual. And it's really, really well done too. It has characters and controls and of course your warranty information and everything like that. But it's cool to see a game harken back to those great old days when we used to get all kinds of goodies with a physical version. And honestly, I love it when this still happens today. Keep giving me the physicals and all the goodies. Number 4 now. Flashback. Now the version that I grew up with was the one on the Sega Genesis, and apparently this is copied and modeled off of the Super Nintendo one. I didn't know that there was a difference or a different version back then, and it's cool to see all the differences now. It's a great game though, I don't mind any of it, and it's awesome to have all the different cool changes with it. The game is updated and upgraded as well. It still has kind of the janky old frame rate and movements, but it certainly is upgraded to the 1080p aesthetic and has a pretty stable frame rate now in game itself. The combat too is pretty crazy. It's one of a kind. It has a animation heavy model, I'll say, but it's still pretty fun to play. Now at first the combat is really difficult to get used to because it doesn't do what you're expecting it to do in a fast-paced, fast action, fast reactive type game. Nope, this game is more of like puzzle setting with how you use your animations to do things. Each thing has its own set of timing, essentially, and a cooldown to it rather, to where you have to actually think about things as you're doing them. It's pretty unique. There are a few other games that do this that are in the same vein, same genre, I should say, but this game kind of made it popular for me. This is definitely one of my favorite old games, and it's good to have this old retro game come back. Alright, let's hit the next one, number 3 now, Immortal Realms Vampire Wars. Alright, well this game is a strategy tactic RPG, but it's kind of different in the sense that it doesn't have a very static story. There are 3 separate campaigns and a sandbox mode, and the sandbox mode honestly has the majority of what you can actually do and accomplish in the game. So in a sense, the campaigns themselves just offer you to teach you how to play the game. But once you figure it out, you'll definitely find the fulfillment in the sandbox mode. Now that doesn't say anything bad about it by any means, way, shape, or form. The game looks absolutely beautiful, and the game does its best to show a lot of detail with the world around you. You really do feel like you own these territories in this area. That being said, the animations are still kind of a little janky, and you can tell this was probably put together on a fairly simple engine. Now, I do love the combat in this game. It is a traditional turn-based strategy, just like any other one you'd find out there, but it's based on actual military movements and military units, in a sense, to where you have units that have unit strength and numbers to them, so as they dwindle they grow weaker, or if they have certain talents they grow stronger. So I recommend checking it out. Let's do number 2 now, King's Bounty 2 for the Nintendo Switch. And this game is one of my favorite tactical turn-based RPGs on the Switch. I have shown this game off before, a long time ago at the beginning of my channel, and I really need to do an update on it, because this game is a lot of fun. I absolutely adore all the different unit types and all the different enemy types. All the different things that you can do in this world too, as far as the story goes, makes it really engaging. It's really, really janky, and the frame rate is not very steady, but you don't need something like that in a turn-based RPG. turn-based strategy RPG, excuse me. So it lends itself to its own problems and its own glitches, and it's still fun. It's very much akin to what you'd find with the love and joy behind a Bethesda game. Now, I have been told that there are other versions and better versions of the King's Bounty games on PC, and eventually when I get a PC, I'd like to try them out. But until then, I'm super happy that they managed to get this onto the Switch. It's kind of an impossible port in my opinion, not really something I expected of the studio, but I'm happy it made it here. If you like military, strategy, tactic, turn-based, that kind of game, you can't go wrong with it. The enemy types are all pretty unique and pretty fun to play as, and you have different magics as well. So let's do number 1 now, Warhammer 40k Mechanicus. Now, I'm pretty new to the Warhammer universe. I've only recently been introduced to it by a good friend of mine, shoutouts to Joe. He's taught me a lot about this, but there's still a lot I don't know. This game takes place under the Mechanicus storyline, where it's a bunch of different mages essentially, that have different connections to mechanical or machine type robotic entities. The story is still just unfolding itself, and I'm very much learning as I go. I'm only a few missions into it, but this game has surprised me a lot, and it's turned out to be a lot of fun. I am familiar with some of the other Warhammer games, and I do enjoy Space Wolf, which has really grown on me a lot. It's another tactical turn-based RPG for the Switch. So if you like the sci-fi aesthetic, you can't go wrong, and these games do a really good job. Well, the last thing I want to mention in this video is there's a special shout out to Assassin's Creed 2 Ezio Collection. That game would not let me capture for some reason, so I'll find a way to squeeze that one into a future video. If you enjoyed this new style of video and this new format and are excited and want to see any certain games, just reach out to me in my comments section. Thank you for watching today's video. It was a blast to make. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day. This is Ogre27 Kane, signing out. Hello everyone, Ogre27 Kane here today, and I want to do another episode of 10 Great Nintendo Switch Titles, Part 2. Today we're going to look at 10 more great Nintendo Switch titles. All of these are published by Nintendo, but not necessarily Nintendo-made games. They're all fantastic games in their own right, and I need to give a special shout out to Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Torn of the Golden Country. I could not get them to capture. So, special acknowledgement, but they're not here. Let's start out with number 10, Cereza and the Lost Demon, Bayonetta Origins.
Cereza and the Lost Demon.
So first up on the list, we're going to start with Bayonetta Origins, and this game is not like the other 3 Bayonetta games, which are action-adventure games. This is an action puzzle game. It has some different mechanics, and it requires you to think a little bit more outside of the box. It's definitely heavily story-driven, and features a bunch of new and different mechanics that the series hasn't seen before. You can tell that this game was more of a labor of love and something fun they wanted to do. I don't know if they're getting tired of doing the same thing with Bayonetta, but it's cool to see a series branch out and try other things. Now, I'll be completely honest, I haven't had this game terribly long, and I got it because my daughter Dovahkiin16 absolutely loves the Bayonetta series. We're trying this one out and seeing what it is, but so far, I don't know what she thinks of it. We'll get a little bit further into it, maybe we'll do a review on it, because I'd really like to see what this game has to offer. It is different than the others, but it still comes from the same great minds. And usually when a great mind has a great idea, it turns into something beautiful. So, I recommend checking this game out if you're a fan of the series, or just like a lot of really cool art. Next up, let's do number 9, Xenoblade Chronicles, the Definitive Edition. Now, this game is completely different. I have an absolute ton of experience with it. I put well over 100 hours into it on the Wii, well over 100 hours into it on the 3DS, and now I've probably put about 100 hours into it on the Switch. This game is absolutely gorgeous with an amazing story, awesome soundtrack, well-written characters, enough fun and progressive dialogue that continues to move forward and doesn't get stagnant at any point. The only thing that may get stagnant about this game is how often you get sidetracked and you don't carry the story on yourself. But I'll be honest, every single time this happened, it was 100% my fault. The combat in this series is pretty unique too. It's a lot more like a MMO, not so much a turn-based, but it does have turn-based elements. I like the way that it's extremely simplistic compared to the other two Xenoblade games, but still gives you enough power and control over your options and strategy to make it worthwhile and give you the ability to feel powerful. Yes, you can OP your character by simply just power leveling, but you can also include some pretty unique strategies and pretty different ways of playing the game. I also like the fact that the story is so well written that it keeps pushing and pulling you forward through the whole thing. One of my favorites. Let's move on now to number 8, Fire Emblem Three Houses. So Fire Emblem Three Houses was a project between Nintendo and Bandai Namco. It's not wholeheartedly an Intelligent Systems game, but it does have most of their top leadership and minds involved with it. You can feel that it's not quite the same as some of the earlier Fire Emblems. It's not to the caliber or quality of something like Awakening, but on top of that, the game does well, looks well, and plays well on the system that it's on. I haven't had the pleasure of playing Fire Emblem Engage yet, and I'd really like to. That's definitely one of the next games on my list, because this game looks really good on the Switch, and it plays good on the Switch. So I believe that Intelligent Systems has the ability and knowledge, like they've always done before on every other game, to improve over the next version on each continual version versus each system. Intelligent Systems is a high quality company and a great game manufacturer, and I do love their products. I do also need to get the upgrade of Advance Wars 2. So, with that being said, enjoy this game if you like strategy tactic combat. It is one of the best on the Switch, and I highly recommend it if you just enjoy story alone. The only thing that kind of bothered me a little bit was the school mechanic, so I'm glad to hear that's gone from Engage. Let's move on now to Bayonetta, the original, and this is number 7 on our list. And I have a special guest with me on this one. It's going to be Dovahkiin16. So tell me, Dovahkiin, what's your favorite part about the first Bayonetta?
I really like the backstory and like the whole story and how it explains and what all happens to her like before the actual events of the game. It's got a good story and I think it's a lot better than the other two.
Who's your favorite character in the first Bayonetta?
I like Jeanne. Her backstory is like, she seems like the bad guy, but in all reality, like, she was trying to help Bayonetta in the end. She's a really good character.
Well, if you had to rate this one compared to the other 3, what place would you put this one in?
I would put it in about 2nd place. It's a good one, but it's not like my top favorite. So, thank you. See you later.
Well, thank you, Dovahkiin. We'll talk to you soon. Now, me personally, I have a lot more connection with the first Bayonetta, because I played this one way back in the day on the 360, and that was a great version. I've since picked it up on every subsequent system that I've owned and every upgrade and iteration of it that I could find. This one is by far my favorite one on the Switch, and I'm glad they finally gave us a physical copy of this game. It absolutely makes my day, and I love seeing the whole collection on the shelf. So let's move on now to the next one, number 6, Metroid Prime Remastered. Personally, I think this remaster is my favorite version of this game. Metroid Prime has always been one of my favorite games and favorite in the Metroid series, but to see the first one come back and look this beautiful and run this beautiful, it runs at a true 60 FPS and has a fantastic resolution. Everything from the original game is intact here, aside from a few little tiny graphical things that are not really important to me, but on top of that, they put in a lot of extras and added you some different options in the menu as well. New control schemes, new motion sensing, things like that. So if you really enjoy the series, this is definitely the best way to play it. And on top of that, there's a physical version, which if you know anything about me, is always the way to go. Now, being a first-person shooter, it's a different take on the genre, but still has a lot of the same mechanics of exploration and upgrading your weapons and items. If you need a different take or a fresh take on the Metroid universe, this is the best game to play. It is the first one in the series, but in my opinion maintains truest to what makes a Metroidvania great. If you need to see more on this game, go check out my review on my channel. So, let's move on to the next one now. Number 5, Bayonetta 2. And once again, I have my special guest, Dovahkiin16, helping me out on this one. Well, Dovahkiin, tell me, what is it that makes Bayonetta 2 special to you? What do you like the most about this?
I also enjoy the story in this one. It's like, it's a really good story. It's not as good as the first one, of course. But it's mainly about, like, Jeanne gets, like, her soul ripped out of her body by an infernal demon, and Bayonetta's to go rescue her. I really like that. Just the whole story itself.
Well then, of course, I also have to ask, where do you rank this Bayonetta in the series?
I would rank this one number 1. It's definitely my favorite out of all 3 of them. I like this story. It's, of course, not as good as the first one. But, like, I just really love this one. I have, like, a connection to this one.
So you have the whole package with this one, huh? The combat, the story, the combos, the characters. You love it all, huh?
Yes, of course.
Right on. Well, I like this one too, and this is definitely the first one Nintendo had a hand in making, and you can kind of feel the difference with this one. Wouldn't you agree? Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Dovahkiin. On to the next one.
Thanks. Bye.
We'll see you soon. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Nintendo did have a hand in making this, and this was originally a Wii U game, so I'm glad to see that they gave it the Switch treatment and the good old port. Let's move on to the next one now, number 4, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Well, having finished Xenoblade Chronicles 1 as many times as I have, and after partially finishing Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I'm about 75% of the way through it. I'm finally getting to a point where I actually want to start this game. Yes, I've owned it since day one on its release, but I haven't gotten into it simply out of the sheer fact that all of these stories are so interconnected. I feel like I need to get absolutely everything out of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 before I really move to this one. On top of that, I have the fantastic expansion of Torna the Golden Country to get through too. So, once I get through those, I will finally play through this, and I do plan to give it a full review because from everything I've heard, this is definitely the best game in the series and does a good job completing the entire arc of this story. I will say, for the couple hours I have put into the introduction to this game, it is definitely an upgrade over Xenoblade 2. They got a lot more out of the Switch, and the game performs a lot better. It looks better, performs better, sounds better. Not necessarily a better game, I won't go that far yet, but it is better in everything that they're using technically with it. So, if you want just simply the graphical upgrade, then go ahead and start with this one. From what I hear, it is a fully contained story and you don't need to play anything else to enjoy it. So let's move on now to number 3, Bayonetta 3. And once again, I have Dovahkiin16 sharing her thoughts with me, because she is, honestly, my resident Bayonetta expert in my household.
Bayonetta.
Well, Dovahkiin, tell me what it is about Bayonetta 3 that you really like.
I really like the characters and the gameplay. It's a lot smoother than the other two, considering it's a lot newer than the other ones.
Well, with that being said, who's your favorite character then?
I still really like Jeanne. I love her character arc and her whole story, and what I also really like is that in this one, she's got her own little side quest kind of thingies and like other side chapters that you can complete as her, as she's doing like her own thing and Bayonetta's doing another.
Well, obviously this one is ranked number 3 for you. Can you tell me why?
It's a good game and all, it's just I don't really like the story. The first two have like a better, it's better at like explaining it. In this one, you're just kind of running around getting chaos gears, and like it's kind of confusing for me because you play as like several different characters instead of just playing as Bayonetta the whole time. It's just like, I still like it, really good game, it's just the story is a little bit confusing for me.
Well, thanks for all your input on these games.
Yes, of course. We'll see you next time.
That'll do it on the Bayonetta series for us, as we've covered all 4 games here. I really hope one of them has shown you how great they are and you give it a try. Let's move on to our number 2 spot now, Metroid Dread. And this is one of the best games on the Nintendo Switch, hands down. If you know anything about me, you know I'm pretty obsessed with Metroidvanias. Obviously, Metroid is the series that started it all, and this game is no exception to that rule. This is definitely one of the best Metroidvanias on the Switch, if not one of the best Metroidvanias of all time. The story has a decent length to it, it's a little longer than some of the other ones, and it has some really cool and fun, unique upgrades to it. On top of that, this game has probably the best graphical presentation on the Switch and some of the best art as well. The music is top notch and the whole game has a very ambient sort of horror type feel to it. If you need to play a good Metroidvania, this is the best one to start with. I would even say this is better than Hollow Knight. That might be controversial, they're both fantastic games, but this game is everything I hoped would come to the system. Now, even though this is the 5th game in the series, it has a standalone adventure, and you don't need to have enjoyed any of the others to enjoy this one. I do recommend going back and enjoying them because they're great games in their own right, and the stories do connect, but you do not need to know what's going on with any of them. This game is a 10 out of 10 and a must-play on the Nintendo Switch. It is worth full price and full recommendation. I can't say anything more. Let's move on now to number 1. Astral Chain. Now this game was recently just my game of the week. If you want to see a full review, go check that video out on my channel. I really enjoy this game and I speak pretty highly of it. This game has a really fast-paced combat and a really fun adventure to it. You basically play a detective who's out walking the beat trying to figure out and gather clues to what's going on with this redshift and understanding the world. You come across some creatures called Chimera and you basically take control of them through a device that you have. These Chimera have their own tactical abilities and become chained to you, in which you use them in tandem. This game has a very deep and fun and frantic combat system. If you enjoy Bayonetta, this is from the same guys that made that, and the combat feels that way. Now, although I said that, I still can't get Dovahkiin 16 to try it out, so eventually I might. But I really hope you enjoyed today's list. It was a lot of fun to make, and I really enjoyed having my special guest Dovahkiin 16 on here with me. Her input is always highly valued to me, and I love enjoying video games with my daughter. Well, thank you for watching today's list. It was a blast to make. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day. This is Ogre27 Kane signing out. Well, hello everyone. Ogre27 Kane here today, and I want to do another 10 great Nintendo Switch titles, part 3. This is the Action Adventure RPG edition, and honestly some of my favorite games are on this list. I really enjoyed this. Now, none of these games are ranked. There's nothing that's going to be in a specific order other than my number 1. My number 1 on this list is number 1 and would be number 1 on most of my other lists. So let's get started with number 10, Daemon X Machina. Now, this game is not what you'd really consider an action-adventure RPG until you really get into it and realize that it's full of menus and tons of little stats to increase and lots of places to go back and forth and do the same thing over and over and over. It is an RPG through and through, even though it has a ton of really fun action elements to it and the adventure to it is really cool. The storyline isn't necessarily game-breaking or anything like that, but the game is fantastic in all of its RPG elements, and if you really want to get lost in some menus, this game has a lot of really good ones. Now, I know this game came out originally with a demo, and I tried that out and it kind of turned me off, but I've recently come back to it, and this game has turned out to be a lot of fun. I really enjoy the animation and the art style and all the effort that was put into the characters and the enemies themselves. As you can see here, the cutscenes blend seamlessly with the game itself, so there's a lot of fun and action to be had. This game was made by Marvelous Studios, if you're familiar with them. They've done a few different ones, but in my opinion, this is definitely one of their better games. Now this is an early Nintendo Switch release and has since seen a few other elements added like DLC and whatnot, but it's still worth its price. Go check it out. Let's go to number 9 now, Darksiders Genesis. So this game is basically if Darksiders and Diablo had a baby. It's a multiplayer game, but it doesn't really offer much of an online that I'm aware of. I've played this game a lot with my daughter, and it's a lot of fun with 2 players. But with 1 player, it's kinda rough, definitely not built for it, and the mechanics to it don't really work out so well as a single player game. It does have a ton of RPG elements. There is leveling up, you can grind, you can go back and re-experience levels and do all kinds of other things. There are multiple characters to experience and multiple things going on in the world, so it really does bring you in and drive you to want to see all these things. But be aware, the game really was built as a multiplayer engine, which is weird because the rest of the universe, which you'll see further on in this list, are all single player games. All that being said though, if you got a good friend that wants to play a good multiplayer and wants to work with you as a team, then you'll have a lot of fun with this game. If you have somebody that wants to annoy you and just bug the heck out of you while you're playing it, yeah, it'll work for its purpose too, but it's really not built for that. This game is kinda tough and it's kinda punishing, and if you're not aware of its mechanics, it may punish you for it. So let's move on now. Let's move on to the number 8 game now, Risen. Well, I've previously done a review on this game on my channel, and if you'd like to check that out, I recommend doing so because I show a lot of little details off about this game that I can't really show you in this. This game is like Skyrim level of jank built on top of a world that doesn't even make sense. But it's a lot of fun. It is a traditional action RPG, very much like Skyrim or Oblivion, has a big open world, has a town, a harbor area essentially, and then a village being the thieves' hideout, far out in the forest, and then there's a few other dotted areas like a monastery and castle and whatnot. The world is nowhere near as big as those, but it is definitely built with the intent for you to explore and make the character you want. Obviously, this doesn't really work out because you still have the same set goals to take over the same set areas and do the same set kind of thing, very much like Skyrim. It just allows you to deviate in that path while you're doing the main quest. The other thing about this game is that the combat system in it is really, really rough, but that doesn't mean it's not fun and doesn't have its merits. The weapons in this game constantly upgrade with new things that you find and new abilities that you gain, and the classes allow you enough variation to move on. So let's check out the next game on the list. So this is the first game in all of the Darksiders series and the first game in the trilogy. Chronologically, not necessarily the case, but that's for another time in another video. This game is a lot of fun. I really enjoy the mechanics, and it is probably my favorite out of all 3 of the Darksiders games. It definitely fits on the level of Zelda, and it treats its dungeons and its character upgrading and all of that in very much the same fashion. And the world itself is all built around a central hub essentially, to which you go to different areas and reconnect to them. So although being built for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, they did remaster this back in 2019 for the current generation of consoles. Now, the Switch version has quite possibly one of my favorite features I've seen on any current gen game for the Switch. It allows you to toggle between a resolution mode at 30 frames a second and a performance mode at 60 frames a second. Now the drop in resolution is minimal. I think it takes it down to about 920, 960p from 1080, but you get that huge bump in the frame rate, which makes this game buttery smooth. If there's any of these to check out on the Switch, it's this one. So let's move on now to our next one. Number 6, Hellpoint. So this game is pretty much a complete clone of Dark Souls 1. but in space on a space station. And I know this game has a lot of critics. A lot of people don't say it's nearly up to the standard of Dark Souls 1, and I will kind of agree with that, but this game really does a fantastic job of emulating it. This is probably the closest thing to Dark Souls that I played on the Switch. And I know there's a lot of different versions and a lot of different clones and things and elements that people take out of it and put into other games. But this game almost completely perfectly mimics every ability, down to even some of the items that you use just simply having the same description with a different name. It's a very shameless clone, but it's a fantastic one. And I know that there are performance issues, a lot of people have mentioned them, but I personally didn't have too many problems with them. Most of my issues with this game are simply that the lighting is really low and it makes it difficult to navigate. And on top of that, you get lost really easily in these dark, open areas with bookshelves and walls and creatures hidden behind them. They'll get a little frustrating, so let's move on now. So at number 5 we have Darksiders 2, the Definitive Edition. And this is once again a fantastic recreation remaster of a fantastic game. This game takes a little bit more of the open world element of some of the later Zelda games and puts them into a more mature, if you will, adult setting. But this game does have a lot of filler to it, and there are a lot of areas that don't really even make sense to why they're in the game. A lot of times you find yourself doing a quest to do the original quest. And that kind of, if you ask anybody who knows anything about storytelling, is kind of silly, and it puts people off. So, this game for me is all about the mechanics, and I absolutely love the mechanics to this game. They're a blast, and all of the abilities and everything you can do. But do not go into this game expecting a super deep story with a narrative that actually makes sense and keeps you along. A lot of this is filler and a lot of it's kind of nonsense. You're just helping to help to help. But if you enjoy the Darksiders story, this is definitely a fun game to play, and I would rank this number 2 right behind the first one in my favorite versions. So let's move on now. Number 4, Ys 8, Lacrimosa of Dana. So this game is by far and away my favorite game in the Ys series. I did play it a little bit on the Vita and got into it, but I've truly come to adore this game on the Switch. I've owned it twice now, and I'm grateful I got it back even though I've 100%ed everything there is to do on it. The combat is absolutely fast and fun and frenetic, and having 3 different characters with 3 different multitudes of abilities makes for a lot of different variation while you play. Not only that, you have an island full of survivors that you're always trying to take care of, and some of them can be included on your quest, and you do have multiple characters as well. On top of that, the enemy variation in this game is really good compared to some of the other Ys games, and there's a lot of cool enemies that you run into later in the game. Now I will say that Ys 9 has better combat overall, but the world in this game is unmatched, and I really hope that Ys 10 comes close to it, because the world in this game is really what makes it, and the high level of detail and the intricacy, and the fact that it's not just the one world map, but the fact that you have a past and present version of it as well, gives you a ton of replayability and opens up and expands the level of this world. So let's move on now to number 3, Darksiders 3. So I'll be the first one to admit, I don't really have much time under my belt with this game. I did pick it up when it was ported to the Switch, I got it brand new on release, and it's sat in my library. I've only put maybe a combined total of 2 to 3 hours into this, and that's not to say that this game isn't bad by any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, I'm really intrigued and think this game is a lot of fun. But being the kind of completionist that I am and just enjoying the story of video games the way I do, I've chosen to go back and play all the way through Darksiders 1 and 2, and I've almost 100%ed Darksiders 2. So I'm just about the point that I can get into this game and truly enjoy it. I do like the fact that the combat in this game feels a little bit more weighty, and all of your character movement has a higher level of animation, especially with the whip, so it leads to a much more beautiful, much crisper kind of effect with your weapon. So, those dorky little things out of the way, this game does look like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope to finish it and do a full review of not just it, but the whole Darksiders trilogy plus prequel when I get down to that point. If any of the Darksiders look intriguing, check them out. So in number 2, we have Ys 9 Monster Nox. And I did mention this a little bit briefly during my Ys 8 conversation. Now, this game has an absolutely fantastic combat system. This is definitely the best combat system in the whole Ys series. Not only that, it has some really cool abilities that allow for traversal around the main hub city, which is about 75% of the game. That's honestly the most disappointing thing. The world in this game is not nearly as big as Ys 8's is, and it's all centered around this rather boring and static town, which, although it does have a lot of cool story elements and a lot of things going on inside of it, does kind of wear thin on you after a while. It's really disappointing to see that they didn't take advantage of the outside world with a lot of these abilities, but I'm really hoping that Ys 10 does. I'm hoping that Ys 10 gives us all of the best parts of Ys 8 and Ys 9. Give us that massive, immersive, beautiful world with all of the traversal abilities and all of the cool different little details of Ys 9. I know that Falcom can do it. They're really good at what they do, so let's pray. Fingers crossed, and let's move on. So, as I stated, my number 1 is Dark Souls. And this is not just my number 1 on this list, but probably one of my number 1 games of all time. This version, for some reason, sticks with me a lot, and I know it's only 30 frames a second, and I played the PlayStation 4 version, and I really enjoyed that version, and I played the Xbox 360 version, and really enjoyed that version. But for some reason, having this on the Switch, on the go, has turned this into my favorite Dark Souls game and my favorite version. I've put several hundred hours into this game. The character you're looking at here has around level 130 with an insane Baldur sword. I don't know what it is about this game in this version, but I can't put it down. I've been playing it non-stop since I got it, since it pretty much came out on the Switch. It's not going to be the shiniest version, it's not going to show off all the best new features of the remaster. As a matter of fact, it basically runs as an Xbox 360 game. But if you really enjoy Dark Souls, I highly recommend checking this out because there's just something to it. It keeps me hooked. It has all of the RPG elements of any other action RPG and a nice massive open world with tons to explore. Cool elements and great characters to interact with. There's also a ton of intrigue and a ton of little collectibles and side things and side quests, and best part about it is I almost think of this game as a 3D Metroidvania. So, that's gonna do it for today's list. So thank you for watching. It was a blast to make. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day. This is Ogre27 Kane, signing out. Well, hello everyone. Ogre27 Kane here today, and I think we're going to do the next episode of 10 Great Switch Titles, Part 4, the Merge and Humble Games Edition. So this is a list of Merge and Humble published games, my personal little collection of 10 different titles. There's a couple first-person shooters, some roguelikes, some Metroidvanias, and some RPGs. A little bit of everything in here. I hope you find a game you enjoy. This list is in by no way, shape, or form in any particular order, and none of these games are ranked higher than any of the others. I enjoyed all of them. So let's get started. So starting out at number 10, we have Skull, the Hero Slayer. And this is a roguelike very much in the vein of something like Dead Cells, but it has a screen-to-screen, as you see right here. The area's environments are not very big, and you do most all of your little battling in these tiny little platforming sections. But that doesn't take anything away from it. It's a fantastic little roguelike, and it has a lot of great other elements involved. The key to this game is discovering new skulls, new heads that you can put on, and upgrading those skulls. As you play through, you'll gain new abilities and powers and meet new friends that will help you along your way in your journey. The thing about this game is that the combat and ability synergies are so different and varied that you can literally never ever have the same playthrough every time you play through it if you want. On the other hand, if you choose to go a certain path and build a certain way, you can follow that path for the most part too. Because of this variation though, it really does change how you play each playthrough. You'll never ever get to play it the same way. This doesn't bother me at all, but it makes it so you are forced to learn each skull and how they work and how they function and what synergies work with each one of them. The last thing I'm going to mention is that this game is really hard, so brace yourself for a long game. Next up, we have number 9, Dead Cells. Well, I hate to say it, but if you don't know about Dead Cells by this point, you've probably been living under a rock. This game has been out for quite a while and received a ton of updates, the most recent update being the Castlevania one. I've purchased all of the other DLCs and updates and played most of it through, but I have not gotten to this newest Castlevania one. I will hopefully when I get another moment and I get some of my backlog taken care of. But in the meantime, enjoy the footage from this game because I still play the main game through all the time and I enjoy this a lot. It has a lot of Metroidvania type elements to it, but it's not really a true Metroidvania. It is pretty much a platformer at heart, and it really desires you to use the combat and synergies within this game to figure out how to get through it. You don't necessarily need to know how to be good at Metroidvanias or know a lot about puzzle solving, but you do need to be quick on your feet with reaction time and understanding how a lot of these abilities fit together. So very much similar to Skull, this game is dependent on each weapon and each upgrade and how you go about your path as you play each playthrough. You'll almost never get the same playthrough unless you set it up in a custom mode, so enjoy the difficulty and enjoy the variation to this game because it will teach you a lot about yourself. So let's move on to the next game now. So here at number 8, we have Darkest Dungeon, and this is a roguelike dungeon crawler RPG. And it has a lot of really fun elements to it. The game is really addicting and will hook you, but it also has probably some of the most frustrating elements to it as well. You'll spend a lot of time upgrading a particular character or unit or group, and you'll design a lot of elements and strategy around this to get through particular areas, only to have it all fall apart with one stupid enemy killing or stressing out one of your characters and ruining the whole party makeup. It's part of the gameplay element to this, but if you don't enjoy having to rebuild constantly, this may not be the roguelike for you. It's a very, very difficult game, very punishing game, but very rewarding game at the very same time. The other element to this game is the story, and the story goes pretty deeply. As you play through each area and each dungeon, beat each boss in each area, you'll get another tidbit and piece to it. At first, you don't really know what's going on, but as you figure it out and you realize that the Lord of the Mansion is basically just using you as puppets to do what you need to do to fix whatever he's done wrong, it kind of embitters you at a certain point. Well, I'm not going to spoil too much more about that, so I think we should move on to the next game, our number 7, Children of Morta. So I have a special guest with me on this one, my daughter, Froggo14. as every time I've ever played this game, I've played it through with her, and we've had a lot of fun together, so I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about it. Well, share your thoughts, Froggo.
The fantasy aspect is cool, and I love the animals in this dungeon crawler.
Who is your favorite character?
Lucy.
How come?
You can attack from far away.
Do you have anything else you want to share?
This game is fun. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Froggo. I really appreciate your input. So this game is pretty much tried and true in RPG. It does have a few roguelike elements to it, such as when you die in a dungeon you may lose your currency, and it has static areas that you can go back to, and they're all randomly generated each time you go through it. But it's still the same area, and it still has the same bosses and the same enemies. You still have the same goal, and it is very much an RPG. I really enjoy the fact that me and my daughter can simultaneously work on our character, and that our characters grow independently of each other if we were to ever play independently. We can also change it up and add in different characters to vary our gameplay. Me and my daughter have put a lot of time in this game, and we really enjoyed it. So I hope you check this game out because it's a little older now and it's kind of a hidden gem. So let's move on now to our next game. So here, coming up at the next spot on the list, a little bit different game. We're going with number 6, Moonscars, and this is a Metroidvania with a lot of Dark Souls elements to it. It's very difficult, but very rewarding. I highly enjoyed my time with this game, and I did a review on my channel if you'd like to see more. This game's pretty dark and foreboding, but the atmosphere fits well with the art style, and the character and how she reacts to the world itself. This game has a ton of elements also designed to keep the difficulty high, such as every time you open up a fast travel point, there's a chance that sacrificing your body might create a doppelganger that you'll go back and have to fight like a midway boss. Some people don't really like this aspect, but I thought it was kind of fun because it adds a little bit of an edge to it, and it gives you a little bit of an experience bump. Yeah, you really need to level up in this game because the enemies are difficult, the strategies are difficult, the timing is difficult, but all of it culminates in a fantastic package, and it's worth its price. It's fairly cheap still right now, and it probably will be a pretty valuable game here in the future, as I don't see it having a very large print run. One of the only frustrating aspects to this game is that the frame rate does have a tendency to tank when you get a lot of enemies on screen. I briefly touch on this in my review, but it's only really frustrating when you have an enemy that can create more enemies. There are some enemies that will just flood the screen with it and drive you crazy. So let's move on now to our next game. Our number 5 game, Ghost Song. Now this is a game that I picked up a while ago and just put into my backlog, not really thinking about it. I had heard some good things and I knew that it would probably be a short print run as well, so I picked it up brand new. It's sat in my backlog for a while and I've only recently started playing it through. This has turned into one of my favorite Metroidvanias of this generation, simply because the whole feeling and atmosphere of this game is like if you took Super Metroid and mixed in Dark Souls elements to it. Yes, I know it's an overused trope, the whole dropping your currency and having to go back to it, but there's a certain amount of suspense that leads into it, and there are ways of recuperating your losses. One aspect about this game that's hard for people to get into is the fact that it has a really difficult beginning to it. But I recommend you stick with it because after you get your second upgrade and you start really understanding the movement and momentum of this world, when you start understanding the combat, not only do you have a ranged weapon, but you also have melee weapons you can equip that are all different and varied as well. You have a stamina gauge, which of course manages all this for you, but your weapons are all independent through independent stats, and that's what you level up. I don't want to give away too much more, but I do plan to do a full review on this game when I finish it. So let's move on to the next one now. Number 4, Signalis. Now once again, this is another game I have reviewed on my channel, and if you want to see more about this, I highly recommend checking that video out as I show a lot more of the gameplay style off itself. This is a pixel art top-down Resident Evil style clone, yes you heard me, but with a sci-fi aesthetic to it. It has some really deep and engaging thought to it as well, and there's a ton of psychological thriller mixed in with it too. The other really cool thing is because of the art style they've chosen, it allows them to throw it back and really utilize the scary features of the original Resident Evil games. Utilizing fixed environments and hiding enemies within those environments really leads for a creepy atmosphere. You think you can see the whole screen, but you never really can. And it leads to a lot of tension within the game as well. The other thing I want to mention is that the physical version of this game features a Polaroid in it, with a bit of a spoiler inside. Once you play the entire game through and you understand who the characters are, and you go back and look at that Polaroid, I think it's a pretty cool little Easter egg that they did there. With all that being said, I think this little 10 to 15 hour adventure is totally worth your time, and I hope you help me support this little independent developer so they can create something else great. Let's move on now to our next one. So in at number 3, we have another game that I've reviewed on my channel. This is a pixel art first-person shooter, but it's pretty unique. It has a lot of options as far as varying your control and changing up the art style and visual appeal of the game. I love when a game offers you a ton of options and allows you to make things more towards the direction of what you like to look at. This is a bit of a Doom clone, but probably the best one I've ever played in all honesty. It has a map too that allows you to go back and forth between areas and uncover secrets. It's a pretty interactive map too, with shops and other things. It almost reminds me of an RPG in a bit of a way. There's a lot of other really cool upgrades and secrets hidden within every level, and it really makes you want to play it over and over. On top of that, the immense blood and gore and violence in the environment seems like it might put you off, but it actually adds to some of the excitement and hype. The game really pushes you to keep going and keep your movement and your energy fast. This is definitely probably the best first-person shooter on the Switch in my opinion, and one that if you're a fan of the genre, you absolutely cannot miss. Once again though, as with most of the games on this list, it is a small print run, and it's probably going to be fairly expensive in the future. So if this game looks appealing, check it out. Let's move on to the next one now. Number 2, Void Bastards. So this is a roguelike first-person shooter, and probably my second favorite first-person shooter on the Switch. The comedy in this game is absolutely off the wall and hilarious. It's almost like English humor, but it's definitely crazy. It's got its American touches to it. The combat in this game is a little different though than what you'd expect from most first-person shooters, as you do have some traditional style weapons, but you also have some very unique weapons in this game. You have things like a kitty cat bomb that goes out and blows stuff up, cluster bombs. As you can see here, I have an automatic stapler. You have a pistol is pretty much your only traditional weapon, but everything else is something completely off the wall. The art style in this is also set up like a comic book and really lends itself to the comedy itself within the game. So whether you can believe it or not though, the story in between the areas is even crazier. You're essentially just a bunch of prisoners on board a prison ship that gets lost out in space, and you're sent out independently to help find parts to rebuild the ship to get you back to the main prison. That's right, you're basically a clone prisoner trying to save your other clone prisoners to lock them back up in prison. It's a pretty outrageous story with a lot of silly elements. So let's move on to our next game. Well, at our final and number 1 spot, we have Slay the Spire. Well, this is a card-based, turn-based, dungeon crawler roguelike RPG. Yep, it's got a lot of elements to it, and it's really hard to explain. But all of those elements function really well, and the game is super addictive. After you do your first run and you get your first batch of good cards, it will hook you and make you want to play over and over. The other thing is that for a roguelike, it doesn't have a lot of elements that change necessarily each playthrough, but rather how you play through with the cards. The enemies themselves are the same enemies, and the bosses are in the same places, but you'll have a different deck of cards and a different setup each time you play it. So you may know how to beat that enemy, but you may not have the right setup. Or you may not have any idea how to beat that enemy and go in and slaughter the entire thing. This game has so many different rogue elements to it that it will frustrate you, drive you crazy, and keep you hooked all at the same time. I'll be honest, for as much time as I've put in this game, I have never slayed the Spire. I have never been to the top. I've only been about 3/4 of the way through it, and a lot of the cards I've found are pretty interesting and unique, so I keep trying. This will probably end up on one of my top 10 most played games lists, as I could see myself probably putting 200 or 300 hours into this over a long period of time. That'll do it. Thank you for watching today's video. It was a blast to make. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day. This is Ogre27 Kane signing out.